Xiao Lan is the strongest mercenary since the end of the world. By chance, she was taken to an ancient country where birds sing and flowers are fragrant, scenery is picturesque, and resources are abundant. Everywhere is full of vitality and top-notch ingredients. She is overwhelmed and uses spatial artifacts to harvest special items. Her only purpose is to gather goods and raise offspring. She spends a lot of time and space planting vegetables, cultivating fruit trees, raising chickens and ducks, releasing cattle and sheep, and feeding pigs, all in order to make her cubs more refined. General Lanner, look at the land I have laid for you, Xiao Lan. No, there's a lot of land in the space, and I can't even get busy. Regent Lanner, watch me dominate the world for you, Xiao Lan. No, conspiring is too brainy. It's better to simply engage in farming. Tianxia Caihua. Lanner, let me help you connect the world with wealth, Xiao Lan. No, having that spirit is not as good as my space to hoard goods and raise offspring. Keywords of the novel. Space hoarding and raising cubs without pop-ups, space hoarding and raising cubs. Download the complete set of TXT, and read the latest chapters on space hoarding and raising cubs. Chapter 1. Heavenly Gifted Cubs. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Heavenly Gifted Cubs. Waves of smoke from the kitchen, winding through the dense forest and mountains, slowly rise and stretch in the sky, creating a beautiful picture. There is a small village near the mountain, and looking at the sparse smoke from the cooking fires, it can be seen that the village is not very big. Looking closer, there are no tall brick and tile buildings in this village. Some are stone houses, and even some are thatched cottages, looking poor and dilapidated, yet full of peace and tranquility. At the foot of the mountain, in a dilapidated thatched cottage, there was still some wriggling under the tattered cotton quilt. Xiao Lan frowned and struggled hard, but she didn't have any remaining strength. Damn it, she cursed angrily. In the apocalypse, she had exhausted all her strength in that big explosion because she had killed too many enemies, from her original strength to her current weakness and weakness. She didn't adapt for a moment, thinking she wasn't dead in the apocalypse, just injured, and even when she woke up, she wasn't sure she was still alive. After pinching herself and feeling the pain, she finally realized that she was really still alive, with an indescribable joy in her heart. She urgently wants to know her situation now. Where exactly is she? Struggling with both arms, yet seemingly covered by something, how could it be so heavy? Finally, I pulled open the object hanging over my head and saw the light again. She struggled to sit up, and only then did she see the weight that had been pressing on her body just now. It turned out to be just a tattered quilt. The material that does not belong to the post-apocalyptic cotton quilt is dirty and torn, and the original color of the fabric cannot be seen. Moreover, the hole is not patched, and the cotton wool is allowed to drill outward, resulting in black and hard cotton wool. Where did you go and who saved you? She self-examined herself and concluded that her body was completely weak, so weak that she couldn't even lift a quilt and was suffocated by pressure. My body can still move, but I don't have much strength. My stomach growled for a while. Xiao Lan was a bit angry. It turned out she was hungry. She searched around the house but couldn't find any trace of food. In the end, she gave up and focused on the house. She looked at the room in front of her, which seemed to be a dilapidated thatched cottage. The walls are all made of a mixture of thatch and mud, which doesn't look very sturdy. Did you appear in a refugee camp? Even in refugee camps, the environment is not as cramped as before. The chirping of birds, the chirping of insects, and the slow sound of flowing water outside the house. Is this a paradise? But the living environment is a bit poor. In the apocalypse, there is no place like this where birds sing and flowers are fragrant. She was quite satisfied without the lifelessness of the apocalypse. Suddenly, she heard the sound of footsteps outside the thatched cottage, and there was a faint gasp for breath, a delicate and tender breath. It's not the heavy footsteps of adults, it's like the footsteps of a child. Although her perception may not be particularly sensitive due to physical weakness, she still has at least some alertness. As she approached, her sharp eyes burst out with a murderous aura. "Mother, look what I found." Before anyone arrived, the sound arrived first, and a childish voice dispelled her newly formed murderous aura. Xiao Lan's attention was immediately drawn to the threshold where some sunlight shone in. A skinny little boy walked in, excitedly swinging towards it with his short legs struggling. Like a little angel walking in from the gentle sunshine. Step by step, it was a bit difficult to walk because he was carrying a bamboo basket behind him. There wasn't much inside the basket, but compared to the little boy, the basket had already reached his chest. It was a bamboo basket used by adults, and he struggled to drag it towards the bed. The little boy's shoes didn't fit well either. The shoes were slightly larger than his feet and couldn't hold well. One of them fell off midway, so he had to leave the bamboo basket in place. He then went back to use his bare black foot to drag the shoes on, ran back to the bamboo basket, and continued to drag Xiao Lan in this direction. Xiao Lan felt her heart follow his footsteps, trembling with fear that he might fall in front of her. But this unfamiliar little boy made her feel inexplicably friendly, and she was very confident that she had never seen this little boy before. The little boy saw Xiao Lan sitting on the bed, and his eyes dodged for a moment. This made Xiao Lan have some doubts, but because she didn't know what the situation was, she chose to remain silent and see what the little boy could say. Immediately, the little boy seemed to muster up his courage, but his words completely shocked her. "Mother, are you awake? Are you hungry? I just followed Lee to dig wild vegetables. Look, mother, they are all quite big." The little boy tilted the bamboo basket like a treasure, just enough for Xiao Lan to see the wild vegetables inside. Xiao Lan was in a state of high shock. If she thought she had called her mother the first time she called her mother, then this second time the little boy ran to her side and called her mother. There was no third person present here except for her and the little boy. Isn't it true that the little boy in front of her called her mother to her? Is he his own son? When did I have such a big son? She couldn't recall that in the apocalypse, she had always been alone and had never had any contact with the opposite sex. A tender voice sounded, "Mother. Look, Aunt Lee taught me how to recognize wild vegetables. This is called gray cabbage, and this is called ground vegetables. They are all very delicious. Mother. This is not the end of my life, it is an unknown world, and I already have children in this unknown world. The birth rate of children in the apocalypse is extremely low, and only nobles can conceive their own children with the assistance of high technology. Xiao Lan has risen rapidly from being a commoner to becoming the strongest mercenary, and there is only a small space to have the authority of nobles to have children. The next step is to become a true nobleman with the authorization of the highest commander, and to be eligible to choose the right opposite sex to have children. But she was ambushed by her own people. After killing most of her enemies, she ultimately chose to die with the remaining enemies due to exhaustion. At the moment of her death, the crystal necklace on her chest emitted a scorching and dazzling light, dragging her soul into a time and space tunnel, and thus appeared in this world. Touching her chest, the necklace was still there. This was the only thought left by her mother, but in the last moment, she brought her here. The new book is out, please collect it as much as you like. Comment. Requesting recommended tickets. Your support is the author's greatest motivation. Love you all. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Mother is not terrible. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Mother is not terrible. She usually uses necklaces as reserve supplies, but she didn't expect necklaces to have this function. Perhaps it took her through time and space, and was reborn into the body of this woman. The chosen place is very good, it's simply perfect. Because this necklace helps me achieve a child who only dares to imagine in my dreams but cannot have it directly in the afterlife. Xiao Lan scrutinized the child in front of him, his small and frail body resembling a paper man, suffering from long-term malnutrition and not being tall. His body looked somewhat weak. He held up the thing in his hand high, with a smile on his face that made Xiao Lan greedily stare, his eyes unblinking. Although thin and small, it is easy to be loved. Is this your own child? Xiao Lan didn't see anything in the child's hand, so she reached out to stroke the child's face. The child took a step back and looked cautiously at Xiao Lan's hand, whispering, "Mother, am I too loud to disturb your sleep? Don't hit me." Xiao Lan looked at her empty hand and fought. "When did you hit the child yourself? It's not too late to feel heartbroken. Is it because I occupied someone else's body and this predecessor hit the child?" She couldn't believe that the child in front of her was so cute, and her predecessor could be so ruthless. "Xiao Bao, be good, don't be afraid. Your mother doesn't hit you, it's just that you have some dirt on your face. Your mother wants to wipe it off for you." She could only withdraw her hand with a teasing tone. "Really? Mother, you're not hitting me anymore." The child looked at Xiao Lan with a surprised expression on his face. Xiao Bao is so well behaved. How could your mother be willing to hit you?" Xiao Lan wore a smile that she thought was very gentle, which Xiao Yu had never seen before. "It's so warm, just like the temperature of the sunshine outside, warm and happy." "Mother, you have forgotten my name again. I am Yuer, Xiao Yu." "Xiao Yu. Yuer." Xiao Lan cursed inwardly, as she seemed to be a lunatic, not only physically assaulting others, but also a fool who could even forget her own son's name. "Well, remember this time, my mother, I'm Yuer." Xiao Yu looked at the gentle smiling face in front of her. Is this still the violent one she was familiar with, always hitting her mother? Did your mother change her mind and just go out for an hour or two? After returning, your mother has improved a bit and no longer had the previous grudges or physical abuse. Remember, you are Yuer. A fool cannot turn into a genius at once. She tried hard to remember it in her heart, and her words stuttered and stuttered. It's better to change slowly. I don't know what people in this world look like now. Whether you suddenly improve or gradually become better depends on the situation, and try not to let those around you think you are possessed by fairies. Be careful to sail a ship for thousands of years. This is the wisdom she has always believed in and the wisdom of her ancestors. In the apocalypse, a world where the law of the fittest prevails, the civilians there are not peaceful either. Bloody and slaughter happen constantly around us. Her thoughts were forcibly pulled back by her, and she looked at her son in front of her, more important than anything else. Let your mother see, what good thing has Yuer found? Her eager gaze gave Xiao Yu great satisfaction in her heart. Here, mother, take a look. I also found a nest of wild eggs, a total of 8. I only brought back 3 of them, which is enough for my mother and me to eat. I also kept 5 of them until we hatched the chicks. If there are more chicks, we can still lay more eggs, so my mother and I can eat eggs every day. He carefully lifted the wild vegetable, and underneath it was a piece of cloth with no visible color, which contained 3 bright white eggs. Look at the child's plump little face, showing off the 3 eggs in his hand to himself. On her palm-sized face, there were some dirty stains, only 2 big, sparkling eyes. There was no flesh on her cheeks, and her cheekbones seemed to be visible on both sides. In an instant, it tugged at Xiao Lan's heart. My Yuer is amazing. Xiao Lan is not stingy in praising her own offspring. Xiao Lan's words of praise made Xiao Yu's small face smile unbroken during this meeting. Xiao Lan took advantage of Xiao Yu's lack of defense and gently embraced him in her arms. Mother, mother, Yuer murmured. An unexpected warm embrace soothed his fear of his mother since memory began. He remained stiff in his mother's embrace, unsure of how to respond to the embrace. His body was somewhat stiff and guarded, afraid that his mother might throw him to the ground and hit him again. This unfamiliar embrace is what he has been dreaming of. Every time I play with De Zhuang, Xiao Qian, and linger from the village until late at night, their parents always open their arms and hold their children back home. In the end, I was left alone with no one to pick me up, no one to hold me, and no one to call me home for dinner. He once had high hopes, but when he thought of his mother, the madwoman they spoke of was suffering from a madness and would never recover. A sick mother would not have such a hug. I really hope that my mother has recovered from her illness now and has been treating him like this all along. Don't get sick again. Poor you have suffered. Xiao Lan tenderly stroked the melon seeds in her cerebellum, her hair thin and dry, devoid of any nutrients. Xiao Yu's actual age should be around 6 or 7 years old. Due to long-term malnutrition, he now looks just like a child of 4 or 5 years old. His slender arms, exposed with bruises and purples, should be the violent force his predecessor exerted on him when he lost his sanity. Mother, are you hungry? I'll go boil these 3 wild eggs and make soup with wild vegetables to drink. Xiao Yu struggled to get up, although his mother's embrace was warm, he still wanted her to fill her stomach first. After his mother falls asleep, he can snuggle up next to her and sleep. Although my mother's illness seems to be getting better now, if she doesn't eat enough and falls ill again, it will be troublesome. No need, I'll cook it. Mom, please go out and see if there's anything else to eat. You're too young, Mom, come and cook. Xiao Lan woke up for a while and regained some strength, so she could go out for a walk. Mother, can you do it? Xiao Yu held on to Xiao Lan's arm, and when her mother regained her strength, she was about to go crazy. Is it really okay to let her go out like this? Won't it disappear for several days like this time? In the end, it was only discovered and brought back deep in the gloomy mountains and forests. I really don't know how my mother survived those days. Sure, trust me. There was an unquestionable firmness in Xiao Lan's eyes, which calmed Xiao Yu's previously hesitant heart for a while, but she still felt a bit uneasy. He quickly took out the eggs and wild vegetables from the bamboo basket and placed them on the low table on the side, helping Xiao Lan walk towards the door. He must be careful to keep an eye on his mother and never let her leave his sight again. This weak body is not even as functional as an old man in the apocalypse. Xiao Lan took a small, silent step with the help of her son, gradually moving towards the direction of the door. The light outside the door is abundant, and the apocalypse is a gray world. There is no such temperature, and the gray light makes everything gray without any color. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Making Cookies for Puppies. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 4. Magical Space. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Magical Space. I don't know about the disappearance of his mother this time. Is there any involvement from Iron Pillar and them? Now that his mother is well, he is crying with joy. He wiped away the happy tears in his eyes and continued to pick the vegetables his mother wanted to eat. Xiao Lan felt her chest burning. Can the space inside the necklace left by her mother still be used in this world? She mobilized her thoughts and tried to enter, and sure enough, she found that her thoughts were not resisted at all, and she immediately entered the space. Seeing familiar objects in the space was really a big surprise, of course, after the surprise of harvesting a cub. These two things were the happiest things for her to come to this world. Today is simply a double celebration for her. Make sure to make the food delicious, but first look for seasonings. If you want to make delicious dishes later, you must have seasonings. After eating, she will check for any gaps and make up for them. She walked and stopped in the space, finally finding soy sauce, salt, and sesame oil. It was great, but fortunately, her biggest hobby in the apocalypse was collecting various ingredients to eat. Nutrient solution is an essential material for the end of the world. It can nourish the mind, regulate the body, and satisfy hunger. However, it tastes a bit better than water, and has many benefits. In addition to essential items such as nutritional supplements, her favorite is to use seasonings to make various types of pasta. Fruits and vegetables are unattainable in the apocalypse, and she can only make these seasonings vigorously and then add them to the rice noodles. She is very good at making various pastries and eating. She found a few dusty small bottles, which didn't look very eye-catching and were not big enough to hold a few meals, so they wouldn't be too noticeable. Soy sauce egg noodles are also very good, but for this meal, we'll start with some vegetables and wild eggs, which can be used to make egg soup. Oh, by the way, she also found the flour. Standing in the space and seeing the pile of flour in front of her, she really felt a sense of achievement because she had accumulated enough food for a mercenary team for a year. Due to year-round warfare, food is difficult to find. When at the base, as long as there is a commission, she will use it to buy weapons, nutrients, rations, and medicine. There is also a lot of medicine piled up in the space, and it has been categorized. I don't know if it will be suitable for my current body. First, I need to use nutrient solution to regulate my body. Her body was too weak, so she adjusted the proportion of the nutrient solution to be smaller. Xiao Lan quickly took a sip, but now her body's strength is very weak, and she urgently needs to supplement her nutrition. After taking the nutrient solution, I feel that my whole body has regained some strength. The nutrient solution can quickly restore bodily functions and is also very effective for external injuries. If there are wounds, they can be quickly healed by washing with the nutrient solution. Nutrient solution is a consumable, but fortunately, most of the materials used in the production are medicinal herbs. As long as she can find suitable types and sufficient quantities of medicinal herbs, Xiao Lan can make them herself. However, she doesn't know if the variety of medicinal herbs in this world is rich enough, or if they are extravagant enough for her. The most abundant amount of weapons, she fights year-round, and the vast majority of her commission is used to reserve weapons. Equipping a legion is not a problem. This is her biggest trump card, but now the body of the weak chicken and the ability to carry the simplest and lightest weapons are all problems. As long as her life is not threatened here, she does not plan to use these last trumps temporarily. She can make simple weapons herself, and the most low-key and easily accepted weapon is the bow and arrow. Making bows and arrows may be a bit difficult for others, but for her, the strongest mercenary, it is an easy task to do with ease. Moreover, resilience, strength, and attack power are all very practical in the apocalypse. Individual combat is common, and this small craft is completely commonplace. With space, everything can quickly change, and she has gained some confidence in surviving in this unfamiliar world. Picking up the seasoning and using a slightly larger bottle, I filled it with a few spoonfuls of peanut oil and a small bottle of sesame oil, and quickly flashed out of space. Her body was in place, entering the space with spiritual energy. With just a few breaths, Xiao Lan resumed her movements. The cub has already washed all the vegetables and placed them on the stove. Then he brought in a small stool and sat calmly on it, his long eyelashes flickering and eagerly anticipating his mother cooking for him. Under the surprised gaze of the cub, he magically took out a few dusty small bottles and placed them on the stove. The fire was not strong enough, so she stuffed a handful of firewood under the stove. She poured in the oil and heated it up. A strange aroma made Yuer's eyes widen. He shrugged his nose and saw that his mother seemed to be laughing at his small movements. He sat up straight again. However, after a while, his mother picked a handful of cabbage and put it into the pot. With a sizzle, he saw his mother quickly stir-fry it, and the rich and fragrant cabbage suddenly penetrated his nose. He couldn't help but marvel at how delicious the dishes his mother made were. Xiao Lan also sighed that the vegetables in this world are really delicious, and now she feels that the nutrient solution she drank just now is not worth it. She fried a plate of cabbage and rapeseed in oil, without any plates. She casually took out 2 iron plates from the space, which surprised Yuer in her heart. He still didn't ask. Xiao Lan went into the room again and took out 3 wild eggs, making an egg soup with spinach. There was also a small pile of wild vegetables that Ewer had washed very clean, which made Xiao Lan feel a bit sad. The cub she just got should have taken care of her predecessor from the moment she remembered. Her heart deepened once again. She must take good care of her cubs and never let them suffer again. Blanch wild vegetables, mix cold, add various seasonings, and finally pour a few drops of sesame oil. All the dishes were ready, and the strong aroma made Xiao Yu take a deep breath. Xiao Lan took advantage of Xiao Yu's lack of attention and collected the seasoning back into the space. The cub finally believed in his mother's ability to cook in his heart, and it seemed that the food was really delicious. Although he had not yet tasted it in his mouth, the fragrance alone made him unable to resist sniffing. "Mother, I'll take care of it." In the wooden bowl, there is a thick and sticky paste made of stick noodles, and the golden paste emits a fragrant taste. It's really fragrant. There are stir-fried vegetables in the pot, with a pleasant aroma. It seems like the kind of sesame oil that Aunt Lee occasionally drips onto her child Dolan and Ernie's bowl, but only 1 or 2 drops each time. He felt a little puzzled in his heart. His mother had nothing else in her hand, and there were no other oil bottles containing sesame oil by the stove. Her mother was like a magician, taking out 2 iron plates and a few small bottles, not knowing where she had hidden them before. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Sunbathing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Sunbathing. It's not very difficult to see my mother cook. She quickly starts the fire and then cooks it casually, and a meal is quickly cooked. But every time I cook by myself, I'm so stupid. Just starting a fire takes a long time. When Aunt Lee saw him cooking, she even said that every time he wiped it like a little flower cat, his face was covered in layers of grass and wood ash. As the fragrance rushed into his nose, he couldn't help but taste it. He had just placed the wooden bowl on the low table, put down his chopsticks, and his mother began to serve. 2 small dishes, 2 strange iron plates filled with tender Chinese cabbage and green rapeseed, with a greasy and glossy surface that made me want to bite my chopsticks. 2 wooden bowls, each containing a bowl of corn paste. Placed on the table, he had just sat down when he saw his mother laboriously walking over with a clay jar containing spinach and wild egg soup in both hands. He struggled to place the clay jar on the low table, then gently stared at him and spoke. "Ewer, let's start. There's spinach and wild egg soup in this clay jar. After we finish the batter, my mother will serve you a bowl. The 3 wild eggs have all been beaten into the spinach soup. Let's eat these cabbage, rapeseed, and spinach first. Come and try your mother's craft. The pancake will be ready in a while." Xiao Lan pushed 2 iron plates piled with tempting meals in front of Ewer. Seeing the encouraging gaze from her mother, Ewer finally moved her chopsticks. Mom, let's go together." Ewer's words made Xiao Lan pick up her chopsticks, pick up the little vegetable she was longing for, and put it in her mouth. Ewer also eagerly put the food in her mouth, chewed it carefully, and finally ate the food made by her mother. Her originally big eyes were almost squinting into crescent-shaped crescents. He never imagined that his mother would have a day to cook for him, and today he must taste it well. "Mother, it's really delicious." "If it's delicious, eat more." Will my mother still cook for Ewer in the future?" "Of course I will, unless Ewer doesn't let her mother cook for you. Then I want my mother to keep cooking for Ewer. Will you agree, mother?" "Agree, no matter how difficult it is, my mother will also fulfill my own offspring's demands." Xiao Lan was truly pitiful when she heard her own cubs worrying about their gains and losses. She solemnly said to her cubs, "Ewer, you are my mother's precious child. My mother will always be good to Ewer. I used to be confused, but I won't be able to do it in the future. Don't always worry about my mother being bad to you again." Upon hearing Xiao Lan's solemn words, Ewer's tears streamed down her face. This made Xiao Lan, who had never taken care of a child before, panic. Her brain was highly functioning, and she even divided her mind and went to the space to search for answers. Unfortunately, she couldn't find it. She took all her thoughts back and quickly said, "You little one, don't cry. Your eyes will turn red like a little rabbit." Upon hearing her mother's words, Xiao felt comforted by her mother. Then he stopped crying and continued to eat with his mother. This is the best and happiest meal he has ever had. A bowl of hot and mushy soup poured down my stomach, and suddenly my stomach stopped screaming, feeling much more comfortable. One big and one small, the two of them were eating the quietest and warmest meal of their lives. A peaceful and harmonious meal entered their stomachs, and the two of them moved small stools and sat outside the thatched cottage. The afternoon sun was warm, making both of them feel warm. The autumn afternoon sunshine is no longer the scorching sun of summer, very pleasant. By the wall of the thatched cottage, leaning against her mother's embrace, Xiao quickly fell asleep. Xiao Lan closed her eyes and entered the space, walking through rows of grids. Each grid is a room, and each room is filled with items. Each room is very large, about 100 square meters, with a dazzling array of items brought over from the apocalypse. As long as a room is fully stored, another room will be expanded for use. In this way, Xiao Lan fills each room one by one, and now there are hundreds of rooms, making it a real rich woman. Xiao Lan was very satisfied from the bottom of her heart. Seeing the water heater, she was now dirty all over. However, with her experience in the apocalypse, she accepted everything calmly. After eating, she entered the space to clean herself, changed into comfortable pajamas, and prepared a small proportion of nutrient solution for herself. I don't know how much proportion of nutrient solution my body can withstand now, so adjust the proportion to be smaller and dilute it. The function of nutrient solution is to quickly restore bodily functions and prevent hunger after consumption. It can replace food, but it has no taste, just like drinking water. Just now, time was tight. She just took a quick sip of nutrient solution and regained some strength. After cooking a meal, although her stomach was not hungry, her body became tired again. She drank a large glass of nutrient solution with anticipation and then moved out of the space on her necklace. Seeing Xiao sleeping soundly in her arms, she quickly fell asleep. With the help of nutrient solution, she basked in the sun and then took a nap, which would have a better effect. A gentle breeze blew by, and I saw figures big and small in front of the thatched cottage, a quiet and warm scene. The temperature in the afternoon has decreased slightly because it is warm in autumn and noon, and both mornings and afternoons are relatively cool. When there is a hint of coolness, Xiao Lan quickly woke up. She now feels that her strength has recovered and she can walk without stumbling, which is a good omen. Looking down at the sleeping little face leaning against her shoulder, Xiao Lan felt inexplicably happy. This is not a dream, this is reality. I have children and I am still a cute little bean bun. On Xiao sleeping face, there was a faint smile, as if she had had a beautiful dream in her dream. Suddenly, he exclaimed, "Mother, mother, don't leave Xiao. You are well behaved, your mother will not leave you." After hearing Xiao Lanru's soothing voice, Xiao quieted down, but he grabbed onto her clothes with both hands, afraid that if he let go, his mother would run out and he would run so hard that he couldn't find her. It's really pitiful that this child has gone through so many terrible things, being abandoned by a crazy woman he cares about the most, making him restless in his sleep. The worried and fearful actions made the cub in front of me feel like a frightened little white rabbit, weak and pitiful. Xiao Lan secretly swore in her heart that she must let this child live a good life and relieve the pain caused by long-term instability in his heart. After drinking the nutrient solution, Xiao Lan's body had returned to a normal level. She stood up holding Xiao and walked towards the only bed in the thatched cottage. With a movement of thought, the tattered bedding was taken into the space to be cleaned. Then, a brand new set of cotton quilts and bedding were taken out of the space, and Xiao was placed on top of it. She leaned down and gently kissed the child's forehead. Xiao suddenly entered a comfortable environment and relaxed her body, which was unprecedented before. He rolled over and continued to sleep soundly inside the gentle, fragrant quilt. It seems that Xiaodubo needs to sleep all afternoon. Xiao Lan quickly took on the role of her mother. With such a considerate and filial cub, how could she not accept it? Seeing that it was still time at night, she needed to familiarize herself with the world first. After using nutritional supplements, her body quickly recovered to the level of an ordinary person, not as fragile as before. When she went into the space to wash herself, she had looked in the mirror and carefully examined her body, which was exactly the same as the time when she was the most miserable in the end world. The yellowed hair, emaciated arms, and frail appearance make it impossible to tell that she is a woman who has been raised. Her face is pale and yellow, and her eyes, which should have been lifeless, now have some vitality. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Catching Wild Game. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Catching Wild Game. To enter this world, everything requires starting from scratch and striving. The resources in the space cannot be replenished from the end of the world, they are all products of the end of the world. She probably won't be able to go back now. She has all the offspring and won't leave her own offspring. However, there is a clear difference between this world and the apocalypse. The sun shines brightly and everything is full of vitality. She can continue to open up rooms to supplement some things from this world. She is not afraid of hardship. Now she has children, but I don't know who their father is. I didn't think much about it. This little bean bun is my favorite and I don't want to share it with others for now. She had to take on the responsibility of being both a father and a mother, thinking about the days when she had seen a family together in the apocalypse, full of energy. The father is tall and strong, the mother is gentle, and the cubs are innocent and lovely. That is one of the few beautiful scenes in her heart. She didn't think much about Yuer's father's problem anymore. She secretly swore in her heart that even if Yuer didn't have a father, she would give Xiao Yu the best. Thinking of this, her footsteps became even more determined as she walked towards the direction of the courtyard entrance. As I walked out of the courtyard, I saw a slightly overweight woman looking over here with concern not far from home. This should be what Xiao Yu said about Aunt Li. She gently covered the door and walked towards Mrs. Li. Seeing Xiao Lan walking over, Li took a few steps back and looked behind her, looking for a stick or other self-defense. The defensive eyes were the same as Xiao Yu's eyes when she first looked at her. Xiao Lan had to stop and stay on a low slope in front of Mrs. Li. Sister Li, Yuer is asleep, don't worry, Xiao Lan smiled. Ah. Are you asleep? Looking at Xiao Lan in front of her in surprise, Xiao Lan was able to speak fluently to her. Yes, Mrs. Li. After coming back from the mountains and forests, I have regained a lot of consciousness. I want to go to the mountains and see what I can eat. I will cook for Xiao Yu tonight. Xiao Lan's words surprised sister.in-law Li a bit. Are you going into the mountain again? You're going into the mountain again. I still have some food, so don't go into the mountain. You went into the mountain before, which made Yuer very worried. Li's sister.in-law wanted to keep Xiao Lan, otherwise she would have to make the child worry and go out all day looking for her. It's okay. I seem to have eaten some grass in the mountains before, but now my mind is much clearer. Don't worry, if Yuer wakes up, tell him not to worry. I will come back soon. Xiao Lan finished speaking and turned around to leave. Looking at Mrs. Li's gaze, she was truly worried about Yuer. Xiao Lan had gone through the deceitful end of the world and could easily see through a person's essence. This kind-hearted person, when she receives the goods, will share some with her. She is really a rare good person. It seems that people in this world are pretty good, and her mood has become even more cheerful. Mrs. Li was very worried because she didn't leave Xiao Lan behind. Today, Yuan Yang looks a bit different and speaks more fluently. Is there really a magical fairy grass that can restore one's mind? Whether there is immortal grass or not, but there are indeed fierce beasts in the mountains and forests. She patted her thighs and wanted to catch up, but saw that Xiao Lan's figure could no longer catch up. She could only shout, "Hey, Yuan, don't go to the mountains, there are fierce beasts in the mountains. The big men in the village have to go hunting together," and this time they went to find Yuan together. Xiao Lan hurriedly saw shouts from behind. She also knows that opportunities and dangers coexist in a strange world, but her son needs to nourish his body, and she also needs to eat meat herself. "I want to eat meat, nourish my body." At this moment, the bloodthirsty nature of the mercenary in the apocalypse is undoubtedly revealed. The target enemy, the beasts in the mountains and forests, set off. Her physical strength recovered a bit, and she moved her wrists and ankles, looking at the lush mountains and forests not far away. Her eyes were filled with anticipation. Her footsteps grew faster and faster, drifting more and more, and soon there was a hint of lightness and elegance. Seemingly effortless, but the speed is getting faster and faster, without any sound of wind, like a beam of light shining into the mountains and forests. I only heard the rustling sound of trees and weeds in the mountains and forests being blown by the wind, and the chirping of birds and insects. Everything was natural without any obstacles, and Xiao Lan felt like she was riding the wind much faster than walking. This body is light and floating, and only the sudden acquisition of the wind body method is suitable for one's current state. Other means require this body to be stronger in order to pick it up again. Here, she cherishes any life that lives, feeling the vibrant vitality of the world. She couldn't help but crave for a moment, taking a deep breath, the fresh breath. Moving with the wind, ethereal and light. She stopped in front of a withered tree, which had lost any vitality. "You can take it out and use it. Take out a firewood cutter from behind your waist, chop down a section of dead wood, carefully crafted it, and quickly made several sharp arrows." Another bow and arrow was created, with bowstrings in the space. Soon, a simple bow and arrow was completed. I tried bending the bow and setting an arrow, and the bow was strong, elastic, and sharp. In this way, if you hunt your own prey, the villagers can also explain it to anyone who asks, which can avoid some trouble. I found a few small vines to tie my bow and arrow behind me, and continued walking deep into the mountains with a chopping stick in my hand. Occasionally, some small white fluffy rabbits could be seen running away from the roadside in fear. Now let's save our energy first. When we catch a bigger animal, we'll bring a few cute little rabbits back to let the cubs play. Thinking of Yuer's worried and adorable face, she had to accelerate her pace. Now deep in the mountains and forests, small animals frequently dart by their feet, and wild chickens can be seen everywhere. From time to time, some wild chickens were scared away by her. Seeing these living creatures made her feel better. She knew a lot about how to make chicken and eggs alone. She quickly saw a few silly deer inside, but she ignored them. "I don't know how lucky I was this time entering the mountain. Can I catch a wild boar? Wild boar meat is more nourishing than those small things to eat. The forest ahead is denser and taller, with a few fruit trees. There are red persimmons, apples, and even chestnuts hanging on it. These are all good things." She picked some ripe ones and put them in the space. Anyway, there are very few people coming from deep in the mountains and forests, so she will pick the others when they are ripe. The mountain road is difficult to walk, and the road ahead is no longer visible, with dense forests and weeds. She waved the machete in her hand and quickly cleared a large patch of weeds in front of her. After searching for a long time without finding any trace of the wild boar, she planned to search again. If she couldn't find it again, she would go back and kill all the prey she saw, stuffing it into the space and taking it back. At this moment, seeing a group of silly roe deer running ahead and a wild boar chasing behind, it's good to see so many prey brought to me all at once, so I laughed and accepted it disrespectfully. The chopping stick knife in his hand was thrown out at the first moment, but the wild boar's skin was too thick, and the chopping stick knife was not sharp enough. Surprisingly, it only scratched the wild boar's back. She sighed, her strength was really too weak. In the apocalypse, a stone she casually threw would kill a wild beast. Now, this knife only scratched the skin of a wild boar. However, the blood and pain drove the wild boar crazy, as it abandoned the group of foolish roe deer in front of it. Turning around, I want to find out who hit me and hurt me. The wild boar was a ferocious animal, and quickly fixed its gaze on Xiao Lan. With its two fangs showing, it flew toward Xiao Lan, intending to knock her away and tear her apart. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Wild Boar Meets Its Mother with Good Luck. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Wild Boar Meets Its Mother with Good Luck. Xiao Lan rushed to the back of the wild boar with lightning speed, picked up the chopping knife, and collected it together with the bow and arrow into the space. These hard-made props cannot be damaged. She found a sharp blade with high hardness from the space, and in the moment when the wild boar rushed over, she vigorously swung it out while twisting her body to avoid it, almost making intimate contact with the boar's body. If it gets hit hard, it won't be a big deal to be injured and suffer a lot. She looked at the wild boar with a bright and cunning gaze. It was the first stew for herself and her cubs. The wild boar was cut by a sharp blade into the carotid artery, and its heavy body was thrown out due to inertia. Seeing that the wild boar did not continue to attack, she knew that the matter had been resolved. Seeing the wild boar convulsing on the ground, a large amount of blood sprayed from its neck. Xiao Lan happily walked over and quickly collected the wild boar into the space. Those foolish roe deer actually witnessed the whole process, and they were indeed foolish roe deer. When Xiao Lan took out her bow and arrow and aimed it at these foolish roe deer, they finally remembered to run away. How could Xiao Lan make them disappear in front of her, bending her bow and arrow? The sound of swishing arrows shooting out, each arrow has a silly deer being stared at on the ground. There are more than 10 foolish roe deer in this group. They were almost destroyed by wild boars just now, but now they have all been left here by themselves. Looking at the silly roe deer lying on the ground, its meat is fresh and tender, and can be fried, grilled, and cooked. It is a rare delicacy. She deliberately let go of 3 of them, and as she watched the swaying bushes in the direction they were fleeing, Xiao Lan felt extremely comfortable in her heart. There are many gifts from nature, but they can also be endless. Just as the end of the world has arrived, everything is in short supply because of excessive human consumption and fishing. This world is so beautiful, much more comfortable than the apocalypse, and she naturally felt a sense of protection. Protect this world from excessive development and exploitation. But first we need to find a way to fill our stomachs. As it gets late, the sticky sticks and vegetables we had for lunch have already been digested. You probably couldn't wait anymore. After collecting the wild boar and silly roe deer into the space, she hurried on. On the way, she encountered a little white rabbit and a wild chicken, so she casually grabbed a few, tied them with vines, and led this string of small animals out of the mountains and forests. As the sun set in the west, Xiao Lan quickly disappeared into the mountains and forests like a gust of wind. Xiao Lan drove at lightning speed all the way, and as it got late, the cubs should be anxious. Fortunately, Xiao Lan and Xiao Yu's thatched cottage was located at the foot of the mountain, far from the village. Without the attention of the villagers, Xiao Lan didn't have to worry at all. She dragged a wild boar in her left hand and a vine in her right hand. A string of wild chickens and little white rabbits were all knocked unconscious by her shaking, rolling their eyes one by one. Before reaching the doorstep, I saw that small figure. The anxious and worried gaze instantly melted Xiao Lan's heart. Seeing his mother appear, his eyes became pleasantly surprised and bright, and he ran into Xiao Lan's arms. Xiao Lan opened her arms and a small head entered her arms. "Mother, you have finally returned. Don't leave quietly. If it weren't for Aunt Li, I wouldn't have known you had gone to the mountains. The mountains are so dangerous. Next time you enter the mountains, you must take me with you. I will protect your mother." After saying these words, he suddenly saw the huge wild boar in Xiao Lan's left hand, which looked like a small mountain. Looking down, did your mother beat such a big wild boar? Seeing the cub's eyes staring wide and her mouth forming an O shape, Xiao Lan's heart was about to melt. He is such a good child. Xiao Lan didn't miss the surprise in his eyes when he saw the wild boar, but the first thing his son thought of was the safety of his mother. Guaibao, take a look at what I brought back for you. Xiao Lan raised the wild boar leg in her hand. Although she had strength now, she still had to pretend to be weak and powerless. She tried her best to be a normal person. Don't make the villagers suspicious, so the wild boar was dragged back by her. Wow, mother, you're amazing. Is this the big monster you fought against? Big monster. Yes, this child has been enduring hardships since childhood, so he probably hasn't eaten meat before. There shouldn't be anyone raising pigs in the village either. Xiao Yu had never seen a wild boar before, and this monster was also a phrase occasionally coined by adults in the village, which was used here. Yuer, this is a wild boar that my mother picked up today. Picked it up. Wild boars are lucky to meet their mothers. Xiao Lan couldn't help but laugh at the praise from the cubs. Yes, I picked it up. My mother can't beat it. The wild boar is indeed lucky to meet my mother. At least my mother won't waste this high-end ingredient and will definitely make the most of it. Yuer tilted her little head for a moment, but still couldn't understand what her mother was saying. Xiao Lan patiently continued to explain, Mother will make wild boar meat into various delicious dishes for her offspring to eat. The little face tilted its head and continued to think for a moment. If it's for the mother's cubs to eat, isn't it for Yuer to eat? He nodded solemnly and said, Mom makes delicious meat for the cubs to eat. Xiao Lan thought of several ways to make meat, all of which she had seen in the Encyclopedia of Food in the End of the World. The detailed recipe and ingredients have steps, just follow the steps to make them. She believes that making food is very simple, as long as there are enough ingredients, enough meat, it can be made. Tonight, I will stew wild boar meat for you. I will make boiled meat slices, fried meatballs and barbecues. There are too many delicious dishes. My mother will choose some for Yuer. Hearing my mother say that, it must be a good meal. Little Head nodded seriously, and his mother was cooking again. He drank a big bowl of corn paste that his mother had made at noon, and the stir-fried vegetables were also very delicious, a taste that Aunt Lee couldn't even make. He woke up and saw that his mother was not around. He was too worried about her and finally waited for her to come back. Now he felt a little hungry. He touched his little belly and said, Hungry, my mother is going to make meat for me. Are you having fun? Happy? Look, Yuer, what's in my other hand? Pretending to struggle, he raised the vine in his hand, and the string of small animals on it waved along with Xiao Lan's arm, then shook. Is this, little white rabbit? And a wild chicken. He had seen it in the grass before and tried to catch it, but couldn't find it. My mother woke up so badly, went to the mountains, picked up a big wild boar, and even caught so many cute little white rabbits. He reached out to touch the little white rabbit's head. The little white rabbit had already passed out, and now he could only let Xiao Yu touch its head. Then he went to touch the beautiful feathers of the pheasant again. Similarly, the pheasant did not react and was knocked unconscious by Xiao Lan's shaking. The wild chicken naturally ranks behind the cute furry little rabbit. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Eating Meat. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Eating Meat. Xiao Yu carried a unconscious little white rabbit in her arms, while Xiao Lan pulled the wild boar's leg and the vine as she continued to walk home. The dilapidated home was right in front of her, and when Xiao Lan saw it, her heart felt warm. The little furry head beside her made her feel warm. Mrs. Li has also gone back to cook, and her son Dalan started working as an apprentice with the carpenters in the village. Her master only manages to have lunch at noon. He has breakfast and dinner at home and currently has no wages. Li's sister-in-law raised her 2 children by sewing and washing clothes, and also brought relief to Xiao Lan young. Xiao Lan closed the gate of the courtyard to prevent wild chickens and little white rabbits from running out. Starting to sharpen the knife vigorously towards the wild boar. The food on the lunch belly had already been digested, and the 2 women were growling with hunger. Xiao Lan quickly opened the wild boar's stomach. Before going to the mountains and forests, she found a small stream not far from her home, making it convenient to fetch water. The stream flowed down the mountain and passed through the village. Now it's still low scheduling day, so she went out with a bucket to fetch water and cleaned up the wild boars at home. The wild boar meat was divided into small pieces, and she planned to apply salt to the 2 wild boar legs and air dry them to make ham. Pig water is used to make brine, and the taste is said to be very fat and delicious, as stated in the recipe of the Apocalypse. This is all thanks to my frequent concern for the life of the nobility, which is the driving force for my own struggle. Unfortunately, what was not achieved until death in the Apocalypse can be easily achieved in this world, which is truly lamentable. Xiao Yu wanted to help, but was pushed by Xiao Lan to play with the little white rabbit and drive away the wild chicken. The little white rabbit and the wild chicken waited for the halo of dizziness to dissipate from their heads, and when they woke up, they found a small pudding in front of them. The little white rabbit remained motionless and crouched on the ground staring at the harmless eyes of those 2 humans and animals. Xiao Yu saw little white rabbits with red eyes, moist, and their childlike nature grew stronger. From once suppressing and being sensible, his mother suddenly became better, and he relaxed his mood in a moment. Seeing both the little white rabbit and the wild chicken staring at me, I intentionally scared them with open teeth and claws. Good now. The little white rabbit ran around, and the wild chicken flapped its wings as it tried to fly towards the discharge wall. However, in mid-air, it was knocked down by Xiao Lan with a small stone. Xiao Yu was originally worried that the wild chicken would fly out, but she didn't know how it fell from the air. After repeating this several times, he finally felt at ease that the pheasant wouldn't fly away, so he chased them and the yard was filled with his cheerful laughter. Xiao Lan watched as Xiao Yu's small figure ran over and over, which could exercise Xiao Yu's body and prevent her from getting sick and uncomfortable. She collected so many books from the nobility in several rooms, all of which were placed in the space and carried with her. The books were classified and placed clearly. She has already memorized everything in her free time. The book says that children should run and jump more, just play like this. Listening to the laughter in the courtyard, Xiao Lan's hand movements became faster and faster. She wanted to cook quickly, so hungry. Opening the lid of the pot, a strong aroma of meat rushed towards me. Xiao Lan took out a few more wooden pots and bowls from the space. There was too much food cooked this time, and the time to go out was too tight. She couldn't make it in the mountains and forests in time, so she had to find ready-made ones. Fortunately, there are many dining utensils in the space, and wooden bowls and pots are quite common, all of which were handmade by them in the Apocalypse. Serve fragrant stewed meat, stew large bones, and add enough seasoning and flour to the chopped raw meat. There are all kinds of flour in the space. Make rice-meat dumplings when Zai Zai doesn't pay attention, and then fry them into golden ones, making Zai Zai's eyes shine again. Soon she gathered a lot of rice-meat dumplings in a wooden bowl, and the lard was almost refined. She wrapped the rice-meat dumplings with flour and put them into the lard after cooking. At the moment of cooking, the sizzling sound was incessant in her ears. Xiao Lan's eyes were fixed on the pot, gently stirring it with the shovel in her hand, without burning it. She first called Yuer to sit at a small low table, eating meat and bones, and drinking soup. When Yuer saw the hot and fragrant meat and big bones, she was simply stunned. Meat. I'm just dreaming. A lot of meat, Mom. A lot of meat, it smells so good. Mom, can I take a bite? The soft and sticky eyes, like those of a deer, made Xiao Lan's heart feel completely soft. This is the first time Yuer has seen meat, because people in the village who have played wild games eat it at their own homes. Mrs. Li is not easy either. It is very difficult to sustain so many people, and she cannot eat meat all year round. Naturally, there will be no meat to bring to Xiao Yu. Xiao Lan shrugged her nose when she saw the cub. She was so cute, what should she do? All of them are for Yuer. They are the cutest babies of my mother. Eat them first. I'll make fried meatballs for you. Noah, spoon, and soup. Xiao Lan took out 2 wooden spoons from the space and handed one to the cub. He quickly picked them up and saw the cub show her a big smile. Xiao Lan became even more energetic. Her hands continued to move, and finally she was about to come out of the pot. The tempting aroma made her unable to resist taking a sip. Yuer felt a bit shy when she saw her mother busy. Even though she was hungry, she didn't move. He felt that he shouldn't have asked earlier. He should have waited for his mother to eat together. How could he be so angry? Then he seemed to have made a mistake, sitting there with his head buried like a little quail, but the faint aroma always seeped into his little nose. Sigh. It's so difficult to endure. He persisted in waiting, his eyes no longer focused on meat and big bones. Turning to staring at her mother, the busy mother took a good look. He occasionally saw his mother smile gently at him, greedily wanting to see her treat him like this all along. The 2 women did not speak again, and Xiao Lan continued to stare at the oil in the pan, frying the meatballs. Yuer, he had been staring at her, but she could feel the adorable little gaze and couldn't help but accelerate her hand movements. She wanted to finish her meal quickly. Feed the cubs vigorously, ah ah ah. Extremely happy. Finally, they fished rice-meat dumplings out of the pot. She was going to make a piece of meat, but she had never eaten anything oily or watery. Now she has too much meat to eat cold, and it's hard to cure her stomach. So she will arrange the boiled pieces of meat until noon tomorrow. Yuer, you eat first, and I'll bring some for you, Aunt Li. She found a piece of fabric in the space that was similar in color to the fabric of this world and covered 2 large wooden bowls to avoid being too conspicuous. Although the villagers hardly ever come to the foot of the mountain for dinner, they still need to be careful. When others are struggling and have no food to eat, they eat big chunks of meat and bones. Isn't this a fair amount of hatred? 1 wooden bowl was filled with stewed meat and big bones, and the other was filled with fried meatballs with sharp points exposed. Mother, I'll go with you. It's getting dark and it's hard to leave. I'll support you. Yuer quickly stood up. Okay, then let's go together. Xiao Lan praised the little nose of the cub, it was cute and fun. Then she picked up a delicious rice-meat dumplings from the wooden bowl on the low table and put it into the baby's mouth. Suddenly attacked, the cub covered its small mouth in surprise. Then Yuer felt the aroma of rice-meat dumplings filling her mouth, and her eyes were full of surprise, so she quickly chewed. He also took one and stuffed it into his mother's mouth. Seeing the satisfied expression of his mother eating meat with him, he was extremely happy. 2 people, one of you and the other of me, ate a few meals each and went out together to send them to the neighbors. A gentle knock on the door. Who is it? A woman's voice came from inside the door. Aunt Li, it's me, Yuer. The crisp answer made Xiao Lan's heart melt again, and her own cub felt cute no matter how she looked at it. Upon hearing the sound, Mrs. Li opened the courtyard door. She was surprised to see 2 figures, one big and one small, and thought that it was time to come to her house and she probably didn't eat, so she asked. You 2 haven't eaten yet. I was just cooking, so let's come in and eat. Today, your master of Brother Dahlin rewarded him with some white flour mantu, and your 2 wives will take some. She thought that the Xiao Lan she saw in the afternoon should be good, not sick, and wouldn't harm the 2 children at home. Besides, she still had herself around. She was stronger than Xiao Lan, so there was no problem. No need, Aunt Li. My mother has made delicious food. Let's bring it to you together. We'll just go back and have it. We still have it at home. Xiao Lan didn't speak, it was always Xiao Yu who spoke in order not to scare this kind sister. Law. She still had to slowly transform. Before Mrs. Li knew it, Xiao Lan had put 2 wooden bowls into her hands, and then led her to go home. If she didn't hurry, the bone soup, stew, and hot rice. Meat dumplings would be cool. Although the 2 families are a few steps away, we still need to hurry up and eat while it's hot. The wooden bowl is very big, and the contents inside are very full. There is also a bowl where the contents are pointed out, but it is covered by 2 pieces of cloth and still carries warmth. What is this? Lisa asked with some confusion, as she couldn't help but want to swallow her saliva just by smelling it. It was so fragrant. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. The environment in which the cubs live is very important. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. The environment in which the cubs live is very important. Cloth heads cannot conceal the aroma of food. Before Ewer was ready, he was pulled back by his mother and had to turn around to answer Aunt Li. This is the boar meat and big bones stewed by my mother. My mother is very powerful. Oh, yes, there is also a bowl of fried rice. Meat dumplings. It's my first time to eat it, and I almost bit off my tongue just now. Xiao Yu's words surprised Mrs. Li even more. Wild boar meat, Yuan, are you making wild boar meat? Yes, sister. Law, I happen to be going to the woods today. This wild boar bumped into a tree and died. I won't pick it up now. Let's all cook some meat and bring some for you. We still have some at home. I'll take Ewer back first. Xiao Lan walked non-stop and led Ewer into the house. Upon hearing Yuan's words, Mrs. Li exclaimed, "What kind of good luck is this? So many people in the village have never seen wild boars in the forest, not even a single wild boar hair has been picked up. This is Xiao Lan's second time entering the mountains and forests. The first time she went, she ate the spiritual grass and became clear-headed. On her second trip, she found a wild boar, and it seemed that Xiao Lan had become even more different since she returned from the mountains and forests. But when she saw that Ewer's mother could recover and Ewer would also recover, she let go of her worries and said, "Where is there a mother who doesn't love her child? Hey, you guys wait." But everyone entered the house. She immediately turned back to the room, put down the wooden bowl in her hand, and hurriedly took 3 white flour mantou. This was the eldest apprentice. She was good at work and diligent and had vision. Her master rewarded him with a bag of mantou. The carpenter in the village is a good person, and his child's apprenticeship with him is the right person. Using a bag of cloth, she turned around and went out to deliver it to Xiao Lan's house. It was then stuffed into Xiao Lan's hand before she returned home. Walking on the way, she wiped away the tears from the corners of her eyes. Ewer is a good child, and I hope Xiao Lan can continue to be good. Only then can Ewer have a place to rely on. Mother, look, it's meat, big bone meat, and rice. Meat dumplings. Ernie has opened the white cloth on the wooden bowl. It is a rice. Meat dumplings fried in pig fat. It is especially fragrant and golden. It is wrapped in a layer of egg batter. The meat soup is also full, really delicious. The stewed meat pieces inside are so big, and the bones are all with bone marrow, which they have never eaten before. They have seen people gnawing on meat bones, which is a proud thing. After all, there are not many people in the village who can eat meat. Looking at the delicious food in front of them, the 2 children swallowed hard, and the fragrance was much better than what they had smelled before. Seeing the 2 wooden bowls in front of her, Mrs. Li thought for a while and said to herself, "Xiao Lan is really good now. She is a capable person who can get meat." Looking at the bowl of stewed meat and other 10,000 bowls of rice. Meat dumplings in front of her, Xiao Lan has a heart. Just in time to nourish Dahlin and Ernie, the family of 3 sat at the table and started eating. Dahlin and Ernie occasionally exclaimed in admiration, and cheerful laughter rang out at home, eating delicious meat. The 2 children happily talked and laughed. Dahlin told Ernie and herself about being an apprentice, and Lisa looked at the happy 2 children in the meeting and secretly said, "The 2 children have been suffering with me. There was no other way, my man had already gone, leaving me behind. If it weren't for these 2 children, I would have been gone long ago." Thinking of the man who had already passed away, her eyes turned red. When Xiao Lan and Xiao Yu went home, they were very moved when the warm-hearted sister-in-law brought white flower mantu. Closing the door, the 2 of them sat in front of the small low table. "You fed me a bite, I fed you a bite, and I couldn't open it." Xiao Lan found the feeling of interacting with her son very good, which she had never experienced before. She ate the pork she had dreamed of and watched the cub she had dreamed of. Listening to the words of milk and milk, the cub looked happy, making her unable to help but laugh. This is such a beautiful life. After the 2 of them were full, Yor rushed to help wash the dishes. "Today's mother is really good. I hope it can continue like this. Mother is better now, and seeing such a mother, Yor, is even more sensible." The new bedding was also very fragrant, and his mother was like a magician, refreshing his world. Everything today was something he had never experienced before. The fragrant and soft cotton quilt, the fragrant and hot food, the cute and soft little white rabbit, the wild chicken running around and giggling, all of this came so suddenly. So much so that he opened his eyes and looked at his mother, unwilling to fall asleep, afraid that once he fell asleep, all of this would disappear. Seeing Yor's pitiful wet big eyes, she packed the bedding and lay down first on it. Seeing her mother about to sleep, Yor quickly got into bed, but still widened her eyes and stared at her, as if in the blink of an eye, the gentle, understanding, and skilled cook in front of her would disappear. "Yor, can't you sleep? Maybe I slept too much in the afternoon, so I'm not too tired tonight," Yor said incoherently, the drowsiness in her eyes clearly visible. "It's already very late now, how could it not be sleepy?" This child, she hugged her son into her arms. "Can that mother tell Yor a story? Tell a story. Is it the same as the story told by the elderly in the village about the rise of the Tao?" He once listened to the elderly at the village entrance tell them the stories their parents had told them before, and they only told the few stories they knew every day without any changes. But the children in the village just listened with great interest. They, along with De Zhuang, Xiao Qian, Linger, and that bastard Tai Zhu, also liked to listen. "No, my mother told you a new story, but don't be afraid." She talked about various novel things she had seen in the apocalypse, such as the flower trees that ate people and the desert that swallowed people. These stories did not make Xiao Yu fall asleep, but her small eyes became even brighter, which made Xiao Lan couldn't help but support her forehead. On the contrary, these stories did not have a hypnotic effect. "Mother, what other stories are there? Yor hasn't heard enough yet." His little head was already pressing down on Xiao Lan's arm recklessly, and a few stories made the relationship between the 2 women even closer. "Why, do you still want to listen? It's almost dawn now. If you can't get up tomorrow, my mother will beat your butt." Xiao Lan pretended to be angry and said. "My mother doesn't know, she's already fine and won't hit Yor anymore," Yor said with a pout. "Okay, my mother will only tell you one story. After that, can we go to sleep?" "All right, mother, speak quickly, speak quickly." The cerebellar melon seeds were swaying and swaying, and I was so happy tonight. Surprisingly, my mother would tell such an interesting story. When I see De Zhuang, Xiao Qian, and Linger tomorrow, I must tell them such a beautiful story. There are also rice-meat dumplings. Ask your mother tomorrow if you can bring some for De Zhuang, Xiao Qian, and Linger. The curved moon gradually blurred, and finally my son fell asleep after listening to the last story. Xiao Lan can finally enter the space and find some things that can be used at the current stage. After autumn, the weather is getting colder. This thatched cottage can still be inhabited in summer and autumn, but winter is difficult to endure. Besides not being warm, it may also collapse under heavy snow. Since I have already taken root here, I must make good plans for living here for the long term. We need to build a new big house with all the necessary facilities, but it's difficult for a crazy woman in this world. The first step now is to change the original views of the villagers towards themselves. By the way, those wild boar meat can be used as a breakthrough to see if the attitude of the villagers towards them can be reversed. After all, children cannot just play with themselves, they also need a living environment, a positive and upward environment, in order to not easily grow crooked. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Plan to build a house. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Plan to build a house. Watching her own washed white cub fall asleep, Xiao Lan finally breathed a long sigh of relief. That skinny little face no longer looked as dull as the color she had just arrived at, but rather had a hint of luster. After only raising for a day, it was obvious that there had been a change, which made Xiao Lan secretly want to continue working hard and see where to start. She walked around this room, touched this place, and looked over there. The room was really rudimentary. She decided to build a house and planned to build a solid one so that she wouldn't be afraid of the harsh cold and heat. This room is entirely thatched. Summer is fine, but as autumn approaches, the autumn rain can be very cool. Once it rains, her lovely cubs will get soaked, and her thin little body cannot withstand it. She needs to make plans as soon as possible. There are quite a few big stones at the foot of the mountain, and she wants to ask the villagers to help build a stone house. This house is really in a state of disrepair, as if a gust of wind could flip the roof over. This thatched cottage was built by the villagers when they saw Xiao Lan with a child on her belly and pitied them. When Xiao Lan appeared, she only carried a swaddle, which wrapped Xiao Yu and a document. Now the document is with the old village chief. Xiao Lan and Xiao Yu's name appeared on it, but Xiao Lan had already gone crazy at that time, so the people in the village couldn't ask anything, and Xiao Lan didn't choose to leave. Perhaps I think most of the people here are kind-hearted, so please give her some food as a gift. Xiao Lan appears at the village entrance all day holding her child, and some kind-hearted people in the village occasionally give them something to eat. Finally, the village chief mobilized the entire village to build a house at the foot of the mountain. Each household grabbed a handful of stick noodles, gathered a bag of stick noodles for her, and put them in the room. Finally, he kindly circled a fence to resist the animals descending from the mountain as much as possible. Everyone couldn't bear it, but the lives of the villagers were just like that. There was no good harvest of food, and there were no good jobs in the village. Every year, there are also times of chaos and hunger. At the beginning, there were people helping Xiao Lan and her. Over time, no family could afford it, and in the end, there was no more relief. Perhaps it was left to fend for itself, but only Li Sa occasionally brought some food for Xiao Yu. Sometimes it's given every 2 to 3 days, and after a while, I get so hungry that Yu keeps crying. Li's sister-in-law saw her cubs crying fiercely, and her mother was unreliable. She would either go out and wander around or throw things when she had nothing to do. Li's sister-in-law was ruthless and decided to take them back to her own home for most of the time. Xiao Yu grew up with Mrs. Li most of the time, so she has always been very dependent on her. Since Yu recorded the incident, Li Sa sent Yu back to Xiao Lan's side. Although somewhat reluctant, Xiao Lan is still the biological mother of the child. Xiao Lan doesn't know about these things, but she knows that Li Sa is genuinely good to Yu. For a long time when her predecessor was not clear-headed, it was probably Li Sa who was taking care of Yu. The cub was so sensible, and it must have been Li Sa who taught her well as the cub itself. She will temporarily settle down like this. Let's take a look at the attitude of the villagers. As long as she has prepared enough meat and vegetables, she can take Ur to bigger, better, and more prosperous places at any time. She entered the space again and searched for many pieces of cloth to make clothes. Although there are ready-made clothes, they are all clothes of their own size, and they are military and casual styles in the post-apocalyptic combat state. Compared to current clothing styles, it is truly unique. She took out some less delicate fabrics, but they were very soft and comfortable, and cut and sewed a warm set of clothes for Ur and herself. Playing tricks, defending and killing enemies, all of which cannot defeat her. Similarly, threading needles and clues is even more trivial. She remembers all the books in the space in her mind and follows them whenever she has free time. The clothing styles on myself and my cubs now are very simple, all of which are Li Sa's handicrafts. However, they excel in clothing styles, which are very simple, and she can understand them at a glance. Unconsciously, time passes by, but time and space remains motionless. When going out, there was no change in time and two simple sewn clothes were placed by the bedside. She pursed her lips and smiled, imagining Ur's surprised expression when she saw the new clothes. She was also very tired and lay in bed, hugging her cubs and quickly fell asleep. This body is still not strong enough, she misses her perfect body after high-intensity exercise before. Even the strongest mercenary in the base was defeated by myself, and in the end, I successfully became the strongest mercenary in the base. However, I usually dress up as a man, but I was injured and unconscious during a mission. The doctor discovered that their strongest mercenary was actually a woman, and the mastermind behind the base planned this assassination plot. In the apocalypse, men are respected, and they do not allow men's dignity to be crushed by women. When I killed several enemies, I lifted their masks and saw the faces of my familiar subordinates. She just realized that she had been abandoned by the base because she was a woman and did it with her own strength. She was also repeatedly killed due to their gender discrimination. Thinking of this, Xiao Lan had to thank those enemies. It wasn't because of them that she wouldn't have come to this world and wouldn't have seen her own cubs. They will continue to live that kind of crazy killing and controlled life in the apocalypse. Anyway, she came to this new world to enjoy herself. Building new houses, farming, hunting, hoarding supplies, and raising offspring. What a comfortable life, making them envy death. At dawn, the wild chickens in the yard raced to crow and used alternative alarm clocks to wake up their cubs. Xiao Yu found that the cotton quilt was still the snow-white, soft, and fragrant one from yesterday. It had not disappeared, but her mother had disappeared. Mother. He suddenly remembered that his mother was by his side. The bedding next to her has lost its temperature. Has her mother run out alone again? Mother, mother. He sat up all at once and casually pulled on the clothes by the bedside. Unexpectedly, he didn't find any new clothes. He quickly dragged his shoes on and ran towards the door. He found his mother not far from the door. Upon hearing the sound of the cubs approaching, Xiao Lan turned around and looked at her son gently. Are you awake? Soft words comforted his inner unease, and the gentle mother looked carefully, leaving him stunned. Xiao Lan woke up early, which has always been her habit. She never sleeps too much, and as soon as she wakes up, she runs around the yard after washing up. Then I moved my hands and feet and developed a set of fist techniques, which are the most basic mercenary training fist techniques suitable for beginners to practice. Although Xiao Lan has relatively high combat skills, her body still cannot withstand such high-intensity training. Start with basic exercises to improve this bodily function. End of this chapter.